Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. Today on the program, House Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano promises fair hearing on the ABS-CBN franchise renewal.
Doon sa pro-ABS, makinig muna kayo sa anti. Doon sa mga anti, makinig muna kayo sa pro.
Assuring the public that the House of Representatives will fulfill its duty.
We cannot promise you any decision until we finish the hearings.
Amid the petition filed by Solicitor General Jose Calida to nullify the network's franchise.
The action of Solicitor General Calida, in effect, usurps the power of Congress.
And is it the end of the road for US-Philippine military collaborations?
Si Trump pati yung others are trying to save the visiting forces agreement. Sabi ko ayaw ko.
House Committee on Legislative Franchises Vice Chairperson and Isabela Representative Antonio Tonipet Albano and former Presidential Spokesperson Harry Roque join us live. Thank you for joining us. I'm Pinky Webb. House Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano insists that the House of Representatives will not be rushed in hearing the franchise renewal of ABS-CBN. The statement comes after Solicitor General Jose Calida asked the Supreme Court to put an end to the network's, quote, highly abusive practices by scrapping its current franchise. Cayetano adds that the franchise renewal of ABS-CBN is among the important issues the 18th Congress is carefully reviewing. Also, the government terminates the visiting forces agreement. What happens now to Philippine-United States relations? Let's go straight to the source of the story. First off, we have former presidential spokesperson and constitutional law expert Harry Roque, attorney. Welcome back to the show.
Always my pleasure, Pinky.
We have two things to talk about. First, obviously, is the franchise of ABS-CBN. Let's understand first, what is your stand on this?
My stand is the issue of whether or not there's been a violation of the franchise for the duration of its life, which is 2 months, is a justiciable issue. So it is, in fact, the proper, the SolGen is the proper authority to file it. And basically what the government is saying is, we want ABS-CBN to show by what authority they are exercising their franchise because we believe that they violated the franchise. Now, of course, it is an issue of fact which the courts must decide. And normally, when there is an issue of fact, you have to follow the hierarchy of courts, that you have to go first to the lower courts.
Right.
But that's not really etched in stone because there's been exceptions recognized by the court on issues involving transcendental importance. No? I have gone to the Supreme Court at least 10 times without having gone through the RTC, and the court entertained the petition because of transcendental importance. No? Having said that...
Which the SolGen is using.
Yes, which the SolGen is using.
Those two words, transcendental importance. Okay.
Now, having said that, there's also a presumption of unconstitutionality, no? If an act of government infringes on a protected freedom, particularly freedom of speech and freedom of the press. And therefore, my prognosis is, although the Solicitor General has the authority to file the quo warranto petition that he did, which, if granted, will only affect the remaining life of the franchise until March 30, I doubt if any provisional measure will be issued by the court, and I really doubt if he will prevail because of the heavy constitutional presumption. Now, take note, though,
The heavy constitutional presumption of what?
Of unconstitutionality, no? Anything that infringes on a protected right, particularly freedom of expression and freedom of the press. However, that's not, again, etched in stone. It's only a presumption, which can be overcome by the Solicitor General by showing a greater interest that could be achieved, no, if the court will nullify the franchise.
I'm going to be honest, that's a mouthful. Let's dissect this. You're saying that the Supreme Court is possibly, yes, the right venue.
It is the right venue.
Quo warranto. Okay.
I think so.
But congressmen are saying that two things. This is, well, let's begin with this. It's infringing on the right of the House of Representatives to grant or repeal franchises. What do you say to that?
Absolutely not. The rules of the court provide that the Supreme Court can have jurisdiction over petitions for quo warranto, no? And of course, legislative power pursuant to the Constitution is still exercised by the Supreme Court and all other courts created by law. What Congress has an exclusive prerogative pursuant to the Constitution is in the granting of franchises. And that is why I think the pending petition for a renewal of franchise is completely separate from what the Solicitor General filed, now, which is to nullify the existing franchise, although subject only to 2 months, no, because that's the life of it. Now, there is also a doctrine known as the mootness doctrine, which means if the court does not finish its deliberations during the lifetime of the franchise until 30 March, then the issue becomes moot and academic.
Okay.
There is, of course, another exception to that one, and that is if it is susceptible of repetition and evasive of judicial review, no? In which case the court can issue a pronouncement even if the issue has become
So you
moot.
don't believe that this is infringing on the rights of the House of Representatives to renew, repeal, or grant franchises?
Absolutely not.
Okay, I want to go back to our interview yesterday with Congressman Rufus Rodriguez and Congressman Lawrence Fortun because they absolutely disagree with what you're saying. Let's listen. Like when you
Because
say-
ABS-CBN has a valid franchise.
But when
It
you
is not usurping any franchise. So that already removes it from a basis to file. Second reason why it is the Supreme Court has exactly no jurisdiction. Since Congress was the one who gave this to a legislative franchise, only Congress can repeal it. The Supreme Court cannot repeal, cannot cancel, nullify franchises. That's very clear.
Let's get your reaction on that.
The Constitution is very clear. The Constitution defines the jurisdiction and the kinds of petition that the Supreme Court can act upon, and it is expressly mentioned in the Constitution that they have jurisdiction to hear quo warranto petitions.
Right. It's just like the case of former Chief Justice Lourdes Sereno.
Correct. No? And of course, in the end, some, in the case of Justice Sereno, said that impeachment is a sole constitutional prerogative of the House and the Senate, but the court, exercising its constitutional mandate to rule upon petitions for quo warranto, in fact, issued the ruling.
Let's look at the points of the Solicitor General. We're going to put that up on the screen. The violations, allegedly, of ABS-CBN are, let's look at two. The first one is basically the pay-per-view, basically saying that they don't have the right. Here it is, ABS-CBN abused the privilege granted by the state when it launched and operated a pay-per-view channel in ABS-CBN TV Plus, the KBO channel, without prior approval or permit from the National Telecommunications Commission. To this, Attorney Roque, ABS had answered that they had followed the law to the letter, and there was no, all our broadcast offerings, including KBO, have received the necessary government and regulatory approvals and are not prohibited by our franchise. This is the question. Some are saying that if this is a reason to nullify their franchise, why not lodge this before the NTC, the National Telecommunications Commission? Wouldn't that be the right venue?
Well, the NTC has no jurisdiction to entertain petitions for quo warranto. That's precisely the point. No? But I think the crafting of the issue is ingenious because it makes it a legal issue. I don't think ABS-CBN will deny that it has, in fact, pay-per-view. No? The only issue is whether or not a pay-per-view violates a legislative franchise, which is a legal issue. So I think it is a ripe issue for adjudication.
Yeah, but would it be a violation if the NTC did not see this, number one, as a violation or did not call out ABS-CBN to this being a violation?
Well, I do not know how the NTC or the Supreme Court would have decided on it. I'm just commenting on the fact that the Supreme Court can rule on the matter. Of course, there is also the doctrine of exhaustion of administrative remedy, and perhaps ABS-CBN can allege that, but again, that's not etched in stone. Anything that the court considers as of being of transcendental importance, it can rule upon. No? And given that what is being alleged to be violated is an act of Congress, and what is sought to alleged to be violated is an exclusive prerogative of Congress, perhaps it will qualify as an issue of transcendental importance.
Let's look at the second justification or argument of the Solicitor General. They're talking about PDRs further, like Rappler. ABS-CBN had issued Philippine deposit receipts to foreigners in violation of the foreign ownership restriction on mass media in the Constitution, to which ABS-CBN had replied to this. They were evaluated and approved by the Securities and Exchange Commission. Here's the question. If it's validated and approved by the Securities and Exchange Commission, is there even a question on the impropriety of this or if this is indeed a violation? Pinayagan eh.
Let me first give my opinion on the issue of jurisdiction. The court, again, has jurisdiction because it has become a legal issue. And the legal issue is whether or not the depositary receipts constitute a violation of the Constitution, not just the franchise, no? Because the Constitution limits ownership of mass media to Filipino citizens. On the merit, unfortunately, I don't think it will stand. Why? Rappler had PDIs, but what made Rappler dubious and what made the SEC declare that it was a violation of the Constitution was because it gave the foreign holders of the PDI control. They gave the foreigners the decision whether or not to continue with the business, which should in fact be made by Filipino stockholders. I don't think there is such a provision in the PDIs, not just of ABS-CBN, but even of the other media companies. No? And that is why it was approved by the SEC.
Yeah.
And that is why on the merits, I think the court will have to rely on the SEC's finding that it did not violate the Constitution. Contrary, again, to the case of Rappler, because it was the SEC that said that Rappler's PDI violated the Constitution.
It's different. This is a
completely different.
It may be the same, but the decision of the SEC is very different from the case of ABS-CBN.
Because the provision is different. No? Rappler, again, gave the power to close the business to foreigners, which is not found in the PDI of ABS-CBN.
But I want to stick to logic, Attorney Roque. If the SEC said this is above board, how can it be a violation of the Constitution?
Well, that's why I'm saying the odds are against the Solicitor General on this ground. Because there's already been an administrative decision by the SEC, and here the court will in fact respect the administrative decision because they're more qualified to rule on the matter.
Yeah.
That's the truth. So reliance on administrative decisions.
But the first one, what are your thoughts again on that? Just to summarize that, the first argument of the Solicitor General on the pay-per-view?
That's justiciable. On the merits, the court will have the opportunity to define whether or not a franchise given to a broadcast company should come for free or whether or not they have the right to charge for viewing.
We'll be taking a short break. Coming up, is the Solgen's move to nullify ABS-CBN's franchise suppressing press freedom? This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Please stay tuned. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. Our guest today, Attorney Harry Roque. What about the issue of attacking press freedom? Why? The president has said time and time again, I don't want your franchise to be renewed, that the Solgen is the government's lawyer, and some are saying that this is an attack on press freedom.
Well, let's just say that, again, there is a heavy presumption of unconstitutionality which can be overcome by the greater public interest in sustaining the petition for Coaranto. And I think the court will decide. No? In other words, this is an issue that the court itself will also decide. It's a justiciable issue for the court to decide. But my thoughts on it are, number one, even without a franchise, ABS-CBN can continue its news gathering function. There is the internet, there is the Mahiwagang black box, and I think they've been in fact preparing because the Mahiwagang black box can now even be attached to a cell phone, no? And you don't need a television for it anymore. No? So they can still continue to exercise freedom of the press, albeit perhaps they could make a case that given the prior statements of the president, it was really intended to silence ABS-CBN. No? But then again, there's 2 months left. I don't think the court will actually act on the petition within the 2 months. Yeah. And the issue is whether or not Congress will issue them a new franchise.
But, Attorney, you don't think they will act in the next 2 months, but they gave ABS-CBN 10 days to comment on the case filed by the Solgen.
Yes, they did. But I think the court will exercise restraint in this instance. They will not act on it because either way, whether or not they decide to grant or deny the petition, there will be backlash on behalf of the court, on the side of the court. And
so,
that's why I think
off.
They will exercise judicial prudence, and they will let the status quo remain and let the Congress decide on whether or not an extension is proper.
That's your guess on how the Supreme Court will act on this. Joining us now via Viber video call is House Committee on Legislative Franchises Vice Chairman and Isabela Representative Antonio Tony Pet Albano. Congressman, welcome to the show, sir.
Guwapong guest nyo si Congressman Harry Roque.
Magandang umaga.
Magandang umaga daw. Have you discussed the issue of the franchise of ABS-CBN?
Always po. We would like to assure the public that we've always been discussing this, but it's not been calendared. You know, the process of making legislation in Congress does not only reside on committee hearings, and Congressman Harry Roque knows that, but also on back channeling and closed-door meetings. In all cases po, nangyayari ito, not only ABS-CBN, the power nga ho, ang sinasabi namin, of creating legislation does not reside on the committee hearings and even in plenary. Sometimes it is decided either in the South Lounge or even the Speaker's office. So
Okay.
let me assure the public, and Harry Roque knows this, let me assure the public that we're doing our duty even if the public does not know it. Now,
Pero
siguro yung
hindi,
tanong mo, Pinky, bakit namin ginagawa yan? Tama ba?
marami pa po. Go ahead.
Yes. The reason we're doing this is because we admitted the enormous pressure of ABS-CBN, both from both sides, the pros and cons, not less than the president has an issue with ABS-CBN. Now, Jose Calida, Solicitor General, has an issue with ABS-CBN. Other na nasaktan na hindi daw nabigyan ng airtime ng ABS-CBN at nagsoli daw ang si ABS-CBN ng pera are also filing a petition, and we're gathering this so that when we go to our hearing, we can impartially decide on the case with merits.
But
ABS-CBN has been applying
Congressman,
pressure with us also.
why not calendar it already? You have 10 or 11 pending bills before the House of Representatives from what? Many months ago, 9, 10, 11 months ago. Why not calendar it and not just talk it behind closed doors?
You know, actually, people don't even know that this bill of renewing the franchise of ABS-CBN, even in the 17th and 16th Congress,
That's
final
right.
na po. And
Opo.
there was no action on it. So, siyempre, the relevance is, mas importante ko ngayon because it will lapse supposedly in March 30.
That's
But
right.
let me assure you, Pinky, and the public, that even if the bill lapses or the franchise lapses on March 30, ABS-CBN does not cease to exist because of what they call the presumption of regularity, which is the lawyer's term. Maybe Harry Roque will be able to elucidate on that. And what that means, the presumption of regularity is that because Congress has taken the application for the renewal and has not rejected it outright, then the presumption of regularity means that you can continue to operate just as long as you have a provisional authority, which is supposed to be ministerial in
Coming
the
from
National Telecommunications
the
Board.
NTC. Okay, but why
Yes.
not take it up, Congressman?
As
Why
I've told-
doesn't why
yes.
doesn't why don't the congressman just take this up, sir?
Yes, we are taking it up, is what I'm saying.
In a committee hearing, sir. Let me rephrase my question. Why not take it up in a committee hearing, sir?
We are about to. We have
When?
calendared this already. I am not privy to the calendar of the committee because, to tell you frankly, I have 16 standing committees. I am subcommittee chair of the rice, for the rice tarification. So, hindi ko alam ang schedule, but I will get back to you on the schedule. We are assured the public that we will hear the petition that was filed in Congress by ABS-CBN,
Okay.
provided that we
Okay.
all get the necessary pros and cons and necessary people in place so that when we hear this very controversial and enormous case in the legislative franchise, we will be able to be free from any biases from both the President and ABS-CBN.
But you
Remember,
can-
Karen, that if we really wanted to take the stand of the President and not become independent, we can just calendar ABS-CBN's petition last month or 2 months ago and just
That's
throw
right.
it outright. No,
Yeah.
because they're supposed to be legitimate concerns regarding
Okay.
their network.
Congressman
But we are
Albano.
doing this, to answer your question, Pinky, we're doing this because we want to be free from the biases. So we wanted to be careful in processing it. Total, the real termination of this petition is June 30 of 2022. And there has been
2022.
instances in cases where the franchise has lapsed, but the radio or television network has operated because of the presumption of regularity na sinasabi.
So you're not sure, Congressman, when this will be taken up at the committee level. However, you have, if I'm not mistaken, 11 session days left. Is that correct, sir?
Yes, we take a break by March 13 for our summer vacation so we can go to our districts to be able to see what's happening and become the representative of our people.
Yeah.
So I will tell you frankly that masikip na maipasa ang ABS-CBN or even to reject it by the end of our break.
I see.
But at least we are talking to you now. We are discussing it. And Speaker Alan Peter Cayetano and Chairman Chicoy Alvarez has assured us that this is one of the priority bills that we will tackle now because to tell you frankly, natamaan tayo ng coronavirus, natamaan tayo ng
Okay.
pagbuksan ng volcano, which walang quorum. Kahit magtawag kami, may
Opo,
calendar
okay,
namin
alright.
two times yung issue na yan. We don't have enough quorum to tackle it, a waste of time. So we press the issues of other things. Yung VFA ngayon, tinatalakay. At
Yeah.
member din ako ng committee noon, even if I'm
Okay.
vice chairman of this. So we really need to calendar this. And we would like to apologize for the problems that is causing this, especially the anxieties of all the employees. Let me assure the ABS-CBN and its family and its yung kanilang network na we are
Kapamilya
doing
network.
our best to make sure that we will hear your case right away.
All right, you're doing your best to hear the case right away, but it's still not being calendared. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, sir. All right,
Well,
but anyway.
Well, Vicky, we will let you know probably if I get the facts today. We have actually
Sige.
another meeting
Okay.
about this.
Maybe
and we
there
will break it to you.
maybe there's a schedule that you'll find out today. To Congressman Tony Pet Albano. Sir, maraming salamat po sa inyo.
Thank you very
Thank you,
much.
sir.
Vicky.
Okay, Attorney, just a quick reaction on that because after the break, we're going to have to talk about the VFA.
Well, I think Congressman Tony Pet was correct. We should not lose faith in the independence of the House. Number one, historically, they have proven this independence when they impeach a sitting president, Erap Estrada, when they have not passed into law two bills that the president has requested of Congress, the death penalty law and the lowering of age of criminal responsibility. No? So we must not lose hope in our representatives, and we should not lose hope, of course, in the power of public opinion, because let's face it, the viewers of Provinciano would want their voices heard by their representatives.
Do you think they're going to pass it? Or do
Well-
you think they're going to sit on it? Or do you think, tatlo lang naman yun eh, pass it, sit on it, or deny it?
I think they will sit on it for the time being. They will say, as Congressman Tony Pet Albano has said, that there is a remedy that NTC can provide a provisional authority. What I probably disagree with is when he said it was ministerial. It's not.
To the NTC?
It's still discretionary on the part of the NTC to issue provisional authority. There is no mandamus or court order that they can file to compel NTC to issue that provisional
Got
authority
it.
if they don't want to.
Yeah,
It is still
it's up to them.
discretionary.
Okay, so we need to talk. So much to talk about, Attorney, but we're going to have to take a very quick break. And the VFA right after. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. Our guest today, Attorney Harry Roque. The VFA, the cancellation of the VFA, 180 days from the time of receipt. Is this a loss for the country?
No. Well, again, I have to disclose that I have a bias here.
Yeah.
I represented former Senate President Jovito Salonga in a constitutional challenge against the VFA, and we did argue that it was unconstitutional because Americans did not bother to treat it as a treaty without Senate concurrence on the part of the Americans. And number two, violation of equal protection of the law, because look at what happened to Pemberton. After I've convicted him, he's in a golden cage, whereas all other murderers are there in Muntinlupa. No?
Let me go to him. What will happen?
I
to,
hope he's sent.
Pemberton?
I hope after the 6-month period, after 6 months had lapsed and the
termination.
VFA has finally been terminated, that he will finally be moved to Muntinlupa, where he belongs, together with Ampatuans and other killers.
Yeah, but could it be possible that he be taken to the United States because there's no more VFA, sir?
No, because he is now serving a sentence. He is now under jurisdiction of the Bureau of Corrections, and the only reason why he's being kept in that golden cage is because of the VFA. And without the VFA, he should be treated like all other prisoners, convicted felons, and sent to Muntinlupa.
So his right to stay in what you call a golden cage ceases
Yes.
once the VFA is canceled.
In fact, it was in the decision, in the case that we filed, it was a partial victory because the court, in fact, nullified the Kearney-Romulo agreement and said that there has to be a special agreement where to detain him, which has to be in Philippine soil, no, and not in the premises of the U.S. Embassy. So even that agreement expires with the VFA
I see.
because the only legal basis for that agreement is the VFA.
Attorney, does it need the concurrence of the Senate?
No, because in the decision itself, I lost the case. No, it was a partial victory insofar as it nullified the Kearney-Romulo, but I lost the constitutional challenge. Why? Because according to the court, the VFA is a mere implementing agreement to a treaty, which is the Mutual Defense Treaty. So since it is not a treaty, then it does not require Senate concurrence. The confusion here is because just because the Senate, the Philippine Senate, gave its concurrence to the VFA does not make it a treaty.
Right.
And proof of this is the Americans did not bother to ratify it or concur in it either, no? Because they knew that it was only an executive agreement, no? But in the first challenge against it, the court said it's not our business to inquire on why they did not concur, no? Why the U.S. Senate did not concur. Except that I think that was a mistake because the Constitution provides that henceforth, after expiration of the Philippine Military Bases Agreement, all stationing of troops must in fact be concurred in by treaty duly recognized by the other contracting party as such. So it's not a reason that it doesn't matter what the Americans consider as being as should be submitted to Senate concurrence or not.
Can you liken this to the ICC as well, sir?
No, because according to the decision of Salonga versus Executive Secretary, it's a mere implementing agreement of a treaty and not a treaty itself. But
So
even
iba
if
si
it
ICC,
were,
iba si VFA.
But
Okay.
even if it were a treaty, I think again the written provision of the Constitution is clear. The concurrence is only required in order that treaty shall become valid and binding as
Upon
law.
approval.
To become part of domestic law. But there is no requirement of concurrence if the President wants to withdraw. And time again, and I have at least 10 cases filed in the Supreme Court where the Supreme Court has repeatedly said that the President is the chief architect of foreign policy.
Thank you to Attorney Harry Roque. Wala na po tayong oras. Maraming salamat po sa inyo, sir. Thank you for joining us here on The Source. I'm Pinky Webb. You're watching CNN Philippines.